For a while now, I've been meaning to play Soulstone Survivors, but it always just ended up being a new release or something else that grabbed my attention. So recently, when the developer reached out with a key, I decided now is as good of a time, or maybe better of a time than any, to stop procrastinating and actually check the game out. At this point, I've put about 40 hours into the game, and I have some thoughts. So I'm going to share them in this video. But first, what is Soulstone Survivors? Well, it's a game that takes the loop of a bullet heaven or survivor-like and pairs it with about a half dozen meta-progression systems that you can grind for a very long time. While doing this, it sands down a lot of the rough edges known to the genre, like needing to carefully collect your EXP crystals or fight against an oppressive timer. The end result is a rather inviting game where you can easily turn your brain off, throw Josh Strife Haze up on your second monitor, and continually grind meta progression while you learn about the worst MMO ever, or some really cool retro games. Now, with 22 different survivors to play, there are plenty of different builds to explore, and most of them are pretty darn good at wiping out entire screens of enemies. One of the first builds that I personally found success with was on the Pyromancer. I combined the unique skills Wall of Fire and Meteor Swarm. Then I stacked a bunch of cast speed, multicast, and ignite chance to turn my entire screen into a gigantic lake of fire. This is where I learned there's an option in the graphics slider to lower the intensity of your skill effects so that you can actually see your screen. The game also does a very good job of making it clear when skill synergies exist, by explaining things through detailed tooltips and even highlighting skills that are affected when you select upgrades. So you're going to go into the map, kill a bunch of enemies, collect all their materials, and then use those materials to unlock new characters, advance skills, craft weapons, enhance weapons, and then do all of that again to unlock more stuff. In fact, there was so much to do in terms of a meta progression, and the game notifies you about things so frequently, that I was almost reminded of a mobile game. Except in this case, instead of the notifications being used for evil, or to try to annoy you into pulling the newest hot waifu on the gacha banner, it's to show how rewarding the last run was, and also to give you a nice, easily achievable goal of what to do next. Even 40 hours in, I was still regularly unlocking new characters, getting weapon upgrades on existing characters, getting more skill points, getting achievements for nearly everything while I did all this, and also enhancing some of my weapons because it took me like 20 hours to learn that was even a system. So if anything, I would say Soulstone Survivors is less about winning in a given run, and more about how many achievements you unlock after. Since the heart of the game lies in its progression and meta-progression systems, let's explore those first, before moving on to build and then wrapping everything up with a few closing thoughts. So first up, choosing a character. There are 22 different survivors you can play, but at the start, you have to choose between the Barbarian and the Pyromancer. Each character has a list of passive stat bonuses. So for example, the Barbarian has maximum health, crit chance, cast frequency, and movement speed. Each character also has unique skills. The Pyromancer's unique skills are Conflagrate, Firewall, and Meteor Shower. Like I said, very good at turning your screen into an indistinguishable, very bright ball of pixels. This is absolutely a sunglasses recommended class. And in general, I found the unique skills to be stronger than the regular skills a character has available. It's not always the case, but in a lot of cases, they are very good and well worth putting the time into unlocking. Now, in addition to stats and skills, each character has available skill types, though you can mix and match a bit with runes, more about that in a bit. Barbarian specializes in attacks, thrust, swing, and slam type moves. But okay, maybe you don't want to play an up-close melee brawler. Well, you can channel your inner Thor because he's also got a lot of lightning skills and even some earth spells. Now, if you want to see a character's full skill list, you can do so by selecting Skill List. This shows weapon skills because yes, a character's equipped weapon does add 2 unique skills to the run, their character skills, such as the very fun Firewall, and all of the general skills that are available, some of which you do have to unlock. And now a little mini rant here. I get the whole point of having secret achievements. You don't quite know what you do, and then you get it, and it's a nice surprise. When it comes to skills, I'd really like to know exactly what it takes to unlock the skill because it's a character building thing. Though at the end of the day, most of these you'll just get by playing, so it's not that big of a deal. All right, next up, let's head over to the blacksmith and start talking about weapons. Much like characters, each weapon has its own stats. So for example, the Scorching Edge on the Spell Blade, you have crit damage, you lose some damage, but that's fine, you can make that up later. You gain movement speed and have area of effect. This would be really good if you want to hit a lot of enemies all at once with, say, Firestorm, a weapon skill, because each weapon has two skills, the default weapon skill and the special weapon skill. Normally, you only have the weapon skill active at the start of your run, though you can activate the special skill through the use of a rune. And each different weapon for the character has its own unique weapon skill and then its weapon special skills, some of which, like Arcane Overload, are quite interesting. The damage here is multiplied based on multicast chance. So if you want to have a whole bunch of extra damage, maybe stack up a bunch of multicast. Now, if you want to craft the weapons, you need different materials, some of which are more common than others. In general, you find these by grinding game modes. So for Mithril, gotta do the Whispering Grove. Or maybe kill some bosses, as those do tend to provide a good number of materials as well. Now, the basic progression for weapons is gray, then green, then blue, then purple, and finally gold or legendary. Though not every character has a legendary weapon, and after you unlock a legendary weapon, you can do something interesting. That being, upgrade them. This costs additional materials, it enhances the stats, and if you upgrade a weapon to a certain level, you get the artifact power. So to use the Spellblade as an example here, I've upgraded the Silver Spellblade to +5, meaning I have the artifact power. I've also upgraded the Runeforged Greatsword and unlocked the artifact power here. The artifact power for the Spellblade is Ethereal Shadow. Creates a clone for a few seconds that casts both of your weapon skills at nearby enemies. This is why you might want to upgrade multiple weapons, because if I use the Runeforged Greatsword, the clone will cast Seeker Blades and Piercing Tempest. But if I am using the Silver Spellblade, the clone will instead be using Arcane Overload and Arcane Slash. Now, so far I have found that maxing out weapons, or upgrading them in general, is pretty darn material intensive. So instead of trying to get them all, I stick to the ones that have skills I actually want to use. That said, if you are trying to grind out and unlock a specific weapon, as long as you have a couple stages pushed up to higher curse levels, it's not too bad. Just do a run and you should have the materials. What really gets pricey is maxing all of the upgrades. So that's characters and weapons, but what about skills? Well, initially, you only have this central skill tree, where you get some pretty nice generic bonuses, things like maximum health, or runic power to be able to equip more runes. However, after you allocate everything within the central tree, the ring on the outside unlocks and you start to get to allocate even more things. The outer nodes are instead character specific, so I haven't played the paladin much, therefore I only have 7 nodes. I recently did a very fun run with the sentinel, so I have 50 points plus whatever I've allocated. And I know what you're thinking. Okay, but how many skill points are there here? Well, let's just zoom out a little bit. Nope, more. No, more. Ah, there we go. Yes, it is this many skill points. And because each one of these requires you to take a character up to level 170 to max out their skills, this is yet another system that you can spend quite a lot of time grinding. Again, I'm about 40 hours into the game. I have fully maxed out the Spellblade, and I'm getting pretty close on some of the other characters that I've played a lot, such as the Houndmaster and the Pyromancer. Maxing out one individual character does not take that much effort. Maxing out all 22 is going to take you a while. But it's absolutely worth the effort to do so, because as you play the character and unlock new skills, you gain access to new mechanics. On the Elementalist, you get Elemental Overload, where you collect elemental orbs that fall from defeated enemies, and upon collecting 3 of them, you get a special custom spell. This is really fun and is very good at turning your character into a ball of death and pixels. The other nice feature about unlocking skills is some of them are global. They have this funky little purple border. This applies to all characters. So, by investing in the Elementalist, I make all of my other characters stronger. As you unlock skills in one tree, you start to reveal a little bit more of the total path, including new skills. Now, the first node you unlock is always the character's specific mechanic, but after that, each of these central unlock nodes are runes, which you can use on all of your characters to customize your build, and from my experience, the farther in a rune is, the more valuable it is. Elemental Flow, for example, which I just unlocked, looks absolutely insane. Having damaging negative effects, which I'm assuming means bleed, poison, burn, Deal damage 100% more often, but not lose duration for it, effectively means you're dealing double damage. Okay, admittedly, there's deals damage faster scaling and that kind of stuff, so it's not quite double, but off the bat, before you have any other scaling, it's double. So that is really good, and I'm going to immediately allocate it. I also unlocked this node here, which increases the damage of electric type skills for all of my characters. So again, more power even if I'm not playing the Elementalist. The skill system is pretty crazy, it has a ton of stuff, and it's also where most of your resources go. The nodes cost minor soul stones to unlock, and then after you put a bunch of points in, they stop costing minor soul stones and instead start costing major soul stones, which are dropped by bosses. If you play a lot, you'll get plenty of these resources, but also you may not want to spend them frivolously early on and instead focus on things that are going to give you a direct benefit. Don't worry if you spend it on the wrong thing though, you can always just hit this button here and refund all your soul stones. Now last but not least, we have runes. These are divided into two major categories, versatility and tenacity. Versatility runes tend to provide you with more build crafting options. So for example, skill inclination increases the chance that active skills of a certain type are offered up, whereas unexpected arsenal adds the effects of all of the weapons the character has to the skill pool. Now, if I really want a theory craft, I might select skill mastery, where I can say, all right, normally the spellblade doesn't have access to too many blast skills, but here I can select plunder shot, power blast, gunpowder blast, freezing blow, and buckshot. When I confirm, all of a sudden, these 5 skills will be added to my skill pool in the next round when playing the Spellblade. So if you know what skills are good in the game, or which skills provide the things that you want, you can create some absolutely crazy builds. Now, tenacity, on the other hand, are power runes. These make your builds stronger. Right now I have multicast mastery, which increases the chance of long chains of multicasting. If you have multicast chance, you can multicast inter-multicast with your multicasting. I also have Searing Intensity, which increases all damage when inflicting burn or shattered. This is pretty much at 25% all the time if you're playing a build that can inflict burn because it's very easy to inflict hundreds per second. Then there's Synergetic, which increases the chance of being offered synergy power-ups. Basically, synergy power-ups cause skill chains, so doing something with a fire skill might chain into a lightning skill. These are really fun, and even when it is not the most powerful, I am always tempted to take Synergetic. Sure-footed, meanwhile, is just a really nice generic damage reduction because I didn't want to die. This is also where things like Singular Focus can be found. Skills can be picked up multiple times. So if you wanted to make a build of just all one skill, take Singular Focus. And also, now that I've unlocked this, I am definitely going to try that on my next run because that seems totally crazy and really fun. There's also Commoner, where you banish high-level passive effects, but increase experience so you'll level up faster and get a whole bunch of low-level effects. In short, use versatility to define some of the properties of your build, and then use tenacity to make it stronger. Or, just get Singular Focus and equip all of one skill and then win because that's the best skill in the game. Now I wonder, could I use Blast Mastery to give myself a new skill, and then Singular Focus to equip 5 copies of it? Gonna try that on the next run. Now, after you've spent some time experimenting with skill trees, unlocking new runes, and of course, crafting weapons of a blacksmith, do be sure to collect all of your achievements. Because yes, you've got to have that dopamine, and there is even a notification that won't go away until you do. But okay, I've spent a lot of time talking about game systems. Let's talk a little bit more about the gameplay itself. Starting with, how do you do it? Well, there are 3 game modes to participate in. So there are 3 different game modes. First is the Void Fields. This is very similar to other Bullet Heaven or Vampire Survivor-like games. You enter an area, a bunch of enemies spawn, you kill those enemies, doing that spawns a boss, you kill all the bosses, and congratulations, you win. You can then enter a red portal, where you have to kill elites to spawn more bosses, a yellow portal, where you fight on the same map and just keep going until it gets harder and harder and harder, and eventually you probably get one shot. Or by entering the blue portal, you bring your run to an end, congratulations, you have passed go, collect 200 achievements. After you win these maps a few times, you might notice, hey, they're pretty darn easy. Yeah, that's because you haven't raised the curse level. There are 7 total curse levels, and each time to raise the curse level, you need to select some affixes. So here I have the Frozen Wastelands, which is currently tier 3. To go into tier 4, I need to select some stuff like House of Lords, which will mean I get 2 bosses spawning at once. I could also do Council of Lords. So now, instead of just 2 bosses spawning, they are both active at the same time, and I'll have to have a 2v1 with the bosses. But I still need a 5th curse. I need 5 out of 5. So maybe I want Revenge of the Void, dropping meteors on my own head. And as you can see, a new material, or Calcum, appeared. This is how you get all those crazy materials, by pushing the curse level higher and higher and higher. Here at curse level 2, there's just some pretty common stuff. Up here, curse level 7, all the way up to legendary materials. And again, at any time, you can disable curses, like, nope, I want to go back to normal, re-enable them, or change any of your choices. You're not locked into anything, but as the curse intensity stacks, enemies do get a lot scarier. You get way more prestige, i.e. experience, more materials, and more minor soul stones to unlock things on the skill tree. Next up, there is the Unholy Cathedral, which I haven't done that much. This game mode is very different. The materials you get are kind of random. After you load into the Unholy Cathedral, you are assaulted by an absolute barrage of bosses. You have to kill all of them, and then activate the next ritual. As you do, your levels and your skills are wiped. You then have to get new skills, reinvest, re-level up, clear this 4 total times, and if you manage to survive, whatever build you have at the end, you take against the final boss. So there is a level of tactics here. You don't necessarily just want to grab the best build and the best skills off the start. You might want to save some of that juice, and especially save some of your rerolls to bring the best possible build against the final boss at the 4th round. However, if your build isn't good enough on round 2 and you don't get past round 2, well, rip, you've lost. Time to start again. Oh, and after you complete all the difficulties, of course, there's another level to grind. You can add Rituals of Heresy. Then there's the Titan Hunt. When this starts, you spawn in, and instead of needing to kill enemies to kill bosses, this time you need to get crystals, which you use to unlock the boss room. There are 15 of them, and scattered around the map there are all sorts of random events. Gray events give 1, green events give 2, blue events give 3, purple events give 4. You need to get 15 total, doesn't matter how you do it. So 15 gray events, or 5 blue events. And anything in between. Then you fight against the boss. These are all unique fights. You do not see them elsewhere, which is pretty cool. You collect some blood. After you kill the boss, you do it again. Repeat until you have enough blood. Start the ritual and fight the Void Hunter. This is a corrupted version of one of the characters, and these are pretty cool fights. They're also a little bit spooky. This is the hardest of the game modes in my opinion, but it's a lot of fun. Also, you do still get that feeling of your character getting stronger over the run, similar to the Void Fields. That feeling isn't quite as present in the Unholy Cathedral because your character is constantly being reset at the end of each round. And of course, after you beat them, yes, you can keep going until you can go no more, because everything in this game is an infinite grind. At this point, you should expect that, and you're either here for it, or you've probably tuned out of a video. So now let's go into a run and talk about a few of the progression systems you encounter here. At the start, you're going to have a couple of skills. Exactly how many depends on your choices with runes. In general, I'd say 1 or 2. And you need to use these to kill enemies and collect all the little yellow EXP crystals. Once the bar fills, congratulations, you level up. And currently the game is offering me passives. So I could get Relentless, which lets me use all skills more frequently by giving me the cast frequency stat. Or I could take Multicast, which is an epic power, but it only applies to the Frost Salvo skill. So if this is something that's really good that I plan to keep for a long time in my run, I would invest into Multicast. But if I wanted to make all of my skills higher damage, then I could select Relentless. Now, when you level up, another outcome is being able to pick an active skill. So the options I'm given here, Acid Rain, Chromatic Bolt, and Poison Cloud. And the skills have all sorts of different effects. Acid Rain, for example, deals poison damage, has a pretty low cooldown. Overall, really good skill from my experience. Poison Cloud, on the other hand, a little bit less damage than Acid Rain, but It applies weakness, which increases negative effect damage. So if you have Acid Rain, you might want to pair it with Poison Cloud. As you progress, you also unlock the ability to lock a skill. So it might go like this. I want to keep Acid Rain. Banish a skill. I do not want to use Chromatic Bolt, so I'm just going to make it go poof. And reroll, I get 2 new options. This also removes the lock. So now I could pick from Acid Rain, because I locked it, Death Vortex, which applies Doom to enemies every 0.5 seconds, or Storm of Arrows. No special effects here, it just hits quite hard. 50 projectiles is a lot. For now, I'm going to select Acid Rain. And you should notice enemies dying a lot more. Also, enemies are getting lots of poison effects. And now when I'm offered a passive, damage increase on Acid Rain. I'm going to use the skill for a while, so I might as well buff it up. Now, top right, you can see a few things. There's the danger level, which is currently at 14. This is generally how scary the enemies are. There's also the curse effect, which is at 13. There's a timer, which is going to tick up slowly. Eliminate Lords of a Void. The round is over, and I've won if I eliminate 10 Lords of a Void. This will be after 5, 10, or 15, depending on curse settings. And then last up, eliminate monsters to summon a lord. You have to kill a certain number of enemies, or in some cases, a certain number of elites, to summon that Lord of a Void, and then kill them to then progress and get all sorts of fun materials and soulstones. On the left side of the screen, there are 2 other numbers, blue and green. The blue is lesser soulstones collected, and the green is prestige. Think of this as character levels which are used to unlock skill points. Oh, and sometimes materials will pop up on the left as well. Now, in addition, you can pause, see all sorts of things about your skills. If I want to know more about Acid Rain, I can just hold Q here. It explains poison since that's an effect of the skill. I can come over here, see all of my character passive effects, or I can look here and see what I've collected within the run. Looks like I've got some tin, prestige, and minor soulstones. Now let's kill these bosses. Unlike a lot of other games, there isn't actually enemy contact damage. So let me demonstrate this, assuming the boss will cooperate and not stand in a fire puddle. Well, I would like to demonstrate that I can walk into the boss, but he's standing in a fire puddle, and I will definitely take damage if I touch the fire. Okay, here we go. See, I walked into the boss, and I didn't take damage until I stepped in the fire afterwards. Touching enemies directly does not cause damage. So all the enemies have different attacks and telegraphs that you need to avoid. This is why I have the visibility of the skills lowered by so much so that I can actually see the telegraphs on the floor. Now, if you're really lucky, you will get a legendary power. In this case, I have a legendary damage increase that affects all of my physical skills. Because Acid Rain, even though it is poison, is also considered physical, it's just a physical skill that inflicts poison. Yes, it gets 50% damage, and I'm definitely going to select this. If you want to know how effective your skills are, you can come here and take a look at the damage details. Now, this isn't 100% accurate. Sometimes there are skills that are providing you with really valuable buffs that won't show up very high on this list. But in general, if you want a rough idea of how well are my skills performing, what's my top DPS, what should I focus on upgrading? Well, right now, Storm of Arrows is doing more damage than the rest of my skills combined, it looks like. Oh, and my Venomous passive, also doing pretty good. Now, even after you fill your bar of skills, the game will still keep offering you new options. If you don't want to do this, you can skip active skills entirely. But sometimes it might be worth it to pick up a skill even if your bar is full. Because maybe I decide, oh, well, this whole poison thing, not working out, I want to go for ice stuff. Well, I would pick up Ice Vortex, drop one of my poison skills, slowly phase out the poison skills that I'm not going to use, and pick up more ice skills or things that synergize with ice skills. Something else that I like about the build crafting here is you don't necessarily just take a skill because of its damage. Glacier, for example, 790 damage. It's okay, but realistically, if I'm picking this skill up, it's for the Disoriented buff, which gives 10% increased crit damage. Similarly, something like Split Shot gives Aptitude, which is another crit damage buff, and Daze, which is a crit chance buff. If you want to crit a lot, maybe Split Shot is the thing to pick up. And actually, I'm pretty tempted to grab that one, because I don't think either Frozen Salvo or Arctic Shot is really doing all that much for my poison. So what's doing less DPS? Looks like Frozen Salvo's doing okay. Arctic Shot, not so much. So I'm going to drop that for Split Shot because I feel like that might synergize a little bit better with the Storm of Arrows with doing a lot of my damage, and the Poison skills that may someday do a lot of my damage. Pestilence specifically is what I'm thinking about here, where it causes damage, specifically 44 damage per stack, based on the number of stacks of poison on an enemy. So in the early game, it's not very good, but in the late game, it could very well be, and from my experience has been, an unstoppable monster that absolutely chunks bosses. In fact, when it comes to buildcraft, I've found that most of my success has come from taking a skill that scales off of per stacks of whatever on an enemy, and then finding ways to stack a whole bunch of things on that enemy. Sometimes things that give you damage per stack of a buff on you also works pretty well, but it's always easier to stack debuffs on enemies than buffs on yourself. And so yeah, that's the gameplay loop. You go through, you click all the upgrades, you make your skills do more and more damage, you kill the bosses, and then you pick your portal and keep going, or complete whatever the other objective is if you're playing one of the other game modes. Last up, pay attention to events and breakables on the map. If you see what looks like a little rock or mineral, you can break that, basically walk near it and your skills will destroy it. That gives you resources. If you see what looks like a larger version of this, walk near it and stand in the circle for the requisite time to get a big explosion of EXP crystals. Most of the time, events are very worth doing because they give you a lot of levels. Just keep in mind if there are some dangerous bosses on screen, maybe that's not the time to stand in the event, as your movement is heavily restricted and the bosses could get in a fatal blow while you're trying to stay in the circle. So now I want to talk about some of the builds I've played and found success with. Are they the best builds of the game? Honestly, no idea. Haven't looked into it that much. What I can say is I had a good time with each of these. There's going to be 6 of them, starting with Shadow Spikes. The goal of this build is to stack as much Doom as possible, because the Shadow Spikes spell gains additional damage based on the number of Doom stacks on the target. Shadow skills inherently apply Doom. Of course, you can also apply Doom when applying other status effects or just through any damage. Ideally, a combination of all of the above, because again, you want the most Doom. You don't just want regular old guy in the town square crying Doom. You want scrolling on Twitter and it's 4 a.m. levels of Doom. That's what we're talking about, and if you do that, your Shadow Spikes are going to hit real hard and absolutely melt bosses. Now, the next build is Piercing Tempest. This is a Spellblade specific build since it uses one of the weapon skills. And Piercing Tempest scales based off of your crit chance. There's a buff called Form, which increases crit chance. I haven't explicitly tested this, but I strongly suspect if you get a whole bunch of Form, which pushes your crit well past 100%, this does continue to scale the damage of Piercing Tempest. I have no proof of this beyond the anecdotal evidence of that is exactly what I did, and it went very, very well for me. The end result was halfway between a mage and a physical attacker, so it fit pretty well with the Spellblade power fantasy as well. Now, similar to Shadow Spikes, you can also play Poison build scaling Pestilence. Because Pestilence gains increased damage, say it with me now, based on the number of poison stacks on the enemy. So by grabbing other poison skills, you can get huge amounts of damage off of your Pestilence. One very slight difference though. Doom has to be stacked each time an enemy spawns, but poison can actually be spread throughout the different enemies. Therefore, it's a little bit more efficient. On this build, I found new enemies were getting poisoned almost instantly, and the poison stacks were getting ridiculous, like we're talking 8,000-9,000 at some points. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit easier to build, Poison Skills plus Pestilence works out real well, and it can be played on a lot of different archetypes. Then there's all the Fire Pyromancer. Yes, this does use a couple of class-specific skills, so it's a bit harder to get going, but hey, that's what runes are for, or playing a Pyromancer because Pyromancers are great. Honestly, I didn't go into this one with much more of a plan than click all the fire skills and see what happens. I just found out that class skills were unlockable, I had unlocked them, and okay, it was not particularly good for visibility. It was after this character specifically that I turned down the game's visibility, but it did pretty well against enemies. Turns out you can also stack burn very efficiently, and the Pyromancer's last class-specific skill scales based on the number of burn effects on the enemy. There's a couple of very interesting ways to do that, one of which is to use a different skill. You'd have to import it via a rune. that deals damage based on 200% of a burning value. So you could inflict a bunch of burns, then nuke them off to cause enemies to explode. I have not tried that yet, but it sounds very fun, so I'm probably going to do that in the future. But either way, if you want to watch the world burn, just play a pyromancer. You can't really go wrong. Now, at this point, you may notice a little bit of a pattern with all the builds that I've been talking about. Most of them rely on some sort of skill that scales significantly or possibly infinitely off of a debuff. And that is also the case for the Ice Vortex plus Frozen Hammer slow stack Elementalist I played. Frozen Hammer is an Elementalist skill. Ice Vortex is just a cold skill. Both of them gain additional damage based on the number of slow stacks, and Ice Vortex in particular is very nice because it stacks slow on the enemy. It's pretty efficient at that too. Now, in a more recent run, not the one you're seeing on screen, different run that I didn't end up recording, I used a rune that let me equip multiple copies of the same skill to just stack a whole bunch of Ice Vortexes plus one Frozen Hammer. Visually, it is a lot less interesting than filling the screen with lightning and all sorts of other things. Damage-wise, it's quite a bit more effective. Much like the Poison and Pestilence, I found that Ice Vortex plus Frozen Hammer is a very reliable combo that I could get going without feeling like I needed to reroll skills too much or get lucky in any particular way. Also, it is available on a wide variety of characters because you don't need the Frozen Hammer. But Frozen Hammer, sure, it's cool, but just Icy Vortex, totally fine, especially if you have a few sources of slow from a couple other cold skills. And last of a build that I'm going to just call Infinite Arrow Works. Again, I don't know if this one is a good build. I kind of suspect it's not. But by combining uncontrolled arrows and twin impact, I was able to fill the screen with a ridiculous amount of arrows. Like, everything was covered in arrows. It was hilarious, it worked surprisingly well, and I managed to kill a lot of enemies. I guess this one's kind of a, hey, if you're playing around, don't get too set in your ways. Don't just click all the skills that say deal increased damage per stack of whatever thing. There's some cool things that you can do if you experiment. And because there are so many meta progression systems and so many systems to grind, I feel like I have barely scratched the surface when it comes to builds. I'm sure there are plenty of other very strong or maybe downright broken things which I simply haven't encountered yet. And so, you know what? If you're a veteran of the game, you have a favorite build or some builds that are really effective, let me know and include a little information on how the mechanics work. I'm curious, and I'm sure other people watching the video are as well. And so that's Soulstone Survivors, the meta progression systems, game modes, gameplay, and some builds that I found fun. Normally, if I was to distill a bullet heaven game, something like Vampire Survivors, down to a single word, I would say gameplay. But for Soulstone Survivors, the word I'd use is meta progression. So if you like turning in achievements, unlocking skill points, and enhancing weapons, this is definitely the game for you. Now, personally, I had a bit of trouble getting into it. The initial, 5-6 hours, I was not too thrilled because I found it to be a bit too easy. However, as I got into things and as I realized, the point wasn't winning a run. That was pretty much a given until you go into some of the later game modes and higher difficulties. The point was unlocking things and getting more tools to take into your next run, which you can also make harder. Then I became much more interested because this is basically just a giant sandbox full of all sorts of different systems to play with. Now, if you want to see my thoughts on a couple other games in the same genre, I will link my review to I Am Legion Stand Survivors and Deep Rock Galactic Survivor Early Access up in the card and down below. Or, of course, you can head over to my Steam curator page where I have all of these reviews and many, many more. Also, if you want to see more reviews, do be sure to get subscribed as I'm going to be making more in the future as I try different games. For now, thank you very much for watching to the end. If you enjoyed, leave a like, and with that, I'll see you in the next one.